Nari looked at herself in the mirror one last time. Her skin was now pale blue instead of brown. Her eyes were silver instead of black. She was 8 feet tall instead of 5 feet 6 inches. The person looking back at her was not human anymore. She had trained for this moment for 3 long years. Every day she practiced walking like an alien. She learned to speak in the strange musical voices of different space creatures. She memorized the history of planets she had never seen. All of this was for one mission: to sneak into the most important place in the galaxy. The Galactic Court of Arbiters was like the United Nations, but for the entire galaxy. It made all the big decisions about trade, wars, and which planets could join the galactic community. Almost 900 different alien species belonged to the court, but humans were not allowed. For 200 years, humans had asked to join. Every time the court said no. They called humans too young and too dangerous. Earth was cut off from the rest of the galaxy like a prison. No alien ships could visit Earth. No human ships could leave Earth's solar system. Humanity was alone. But humans are good at solving problems. If the court would not let them in the front door, they would sneak in the back door. Nari was Earth's best spy. She could fight like a soldier, think like a scientist, and lie like a politician. The government chose her for the most important mission in human history. She would pretend to be an alien and get inside the court. Then she would find out why humans were really banned from the galaxy. Her fake identity was perfect. Her name was now Zenth Ka from Centauri Prime. She had fake parents, fake schools, and fake friends. Earth's computers had put her fake life story into alien databases across 3 star systems. If anyone checked her background, they would find a boring office worker who wanted a job at the court. The spaceship she rode to the court's home planet was full of real aliens. There were tall, thin creatures with 4 arms. There were round, fuzzy things that rolled instead of walked. There were beings made of living crystal that sang instead of talked. Nari fit right in. Nobody looked at her twice. The court's capital world was called Tribunus. As her ship approached the planet, Nari pressed her face to the window. The planet was covered in huge crystal towers that reached into the clouds. The towers were different colors: blue, green, gold, and silver. They twisted and curved like frozen music. It was the most beautiful thing Nari had ever seen, but she could not forget why she was here. Somewhere in those crystal towers were the answers humanity needed. Why were humans really banned? What was the court afraid of? Nari was going to find out no matter what it cost. The spaceport was bigger than any city on Earth. Millions of aliens moved through the halls. The air smelled like flowers and metal. Voices in 100 different languages echoed off the walls. Nari followed the crowd toward the government district. Getting a job at the court was easier than she expected. The aliens were not suspicious of her at all. They gave her a simple test about galactic law and trade rules. Nari had memorized all of this information months ago. She passed easily. Her new boss was Senior Arbiter Vex Maladon. He looked like a giant spider made of black metal. His 8 eyes glowed red when he was thinking. His voice sounded like wind blowing through caves. At first, Nari was scared of him, but she quickly learned that he was just a tired bureaucrat who wanted to finish his paperwork and go home. Zenth Ka, Vex Maladon said on her first day. You will process territorial disputes and trade violations. The work is boring, but it must be done. Do not ask questions about classified files. Do not access restricted databases. Do your job and nothing else. Nari nodded and smiled. Yes, Senior Arbiter, I understand. But she was already planning to break every rule he had just given her. Her office was small and gray. It had a desk, a computer, and a window that looked out at the crystal towers. Nari spent her days reading files about alien merchants who cheated on their taxes and planets, that argued about their borders. It was incredibly boring, but it was also perfect cover for her real work. At night, when the other workers went home, Nari stayed late. She told everyone she was a hard worker who wanted to impress her boss. Really, she was using her computer to hack into the court's secret files. Earth's best computer experts had given her special programs that could break alien security systems. The programs were hidden inside normal office software. To anyone watching, it looked like Nari was just doing extra paperwork, Really, she was stealing the galaxy's biggest secrets. After 2 weeks of careful searching, Nari found her first clue. Hidden in a subfolder of a trade dispute file was a document called Species Classification Updates. Most of it was boring lists of alien races and their threat levels, but one entry made Nari's blood run cold. Homo sapiens, classification extreme threat, status containment active, review date pending, notes, monitor for technological advancement, maintain quarantine at all costs. Nari read the entry 3 times. Humans were not banned because they were too young or too dangerous. They were banned because the court was afraid of them. But afraid of what? She kept digging. Every night she went deeper into the court's secret files. She found references to something called apex predator, protocols and predecessor species studies. She found mentions of ancient civilizations and fallen empires, but every time she tried to access these files directly, she hit walls of security that even her best programs could not break. Nari was patient. She had been trained to think like a hunter. She would find another way in. The breakthrough came 3 weeks into her mission. Nari was eating lunch in the court's cafeteria when she overheard 2 aliens talking at the next table. They were discussing a research project about evolutionary anomalies in Class X species. One mentioned that the project files were stored in the archive of predecessor civilizations. Nari had never heard of this archive before. It was not listed in any of the directories she had accessed. This meant it was either very secret or very old, maybe both. That night, Nari used her computer to search for any reference to the archive. She found it mentioned in a maintenance report from 6 months ago. The archive was located on sub-level 15 of the court's main building. According to the report, it had not been accessed by anyone except cleaning robots for over 50 years. Nari made her decision. She would have to leave her safe office and venture into the physical depths of the court building. It was dangerous. If she was caught, her mission would be over, but the answers humanity needed were down there in the dark. She spent the next week planning her route. She studied the building's layout, memorized the security schedules, and found the blind spots in the camera system. On a quiet Friday night, when most of the court staff had gone home for the weekend, Nari made her move. The elevator to sublevel 15 required a special access card. Nari had stolen one from a senior administrator's desk that afternoon. Her hands shook as she slid the card into the reader. The elevator hummed to life and began to descend. As the floors counted down, Nari felt like she was descending into the secrets of the galaxy itself. Whatever she found in that archive would change everything. She just hoped she was ready for the truth. The elevator doors opened, and Nari stepped into darkness that had kept its secrets for decades. But not anymore. Humanity's greatest spy had arrived, and she was going to find the answers her people needed. Even if those answers changed everything she thought she knew about humans and their place in the universe. Word count: 1,150. Nari stepped out of the elevator into complete darkness. The air was cold and smelled like dust and old metal. She turned on a small flashlight and looked around. The hallway stretched in both directions with doors every few feet. Most of the doors had strange symbols that she could not read, but one door at the end of the hall had words in Galactic common language. Archive of Predecessor Civilizations, authorized personnel only. Her heart beat faster as she walked toward the door. This was it. Whatever secrets the court was hiding, they were behind this door. The door was locked with an old-style security system. Nari pulled out a small device that Earth's technology experts had given her. It was designed to hack alien locks. She connected it to the door's control panel and waited. After 5 minutes, the door clicked open. Inside was a room bigger than a football stadium. The walls were covered with shelves that reached up to the ceiling. Each shelf was packed with data storage devices, old books, and strange artifacts. In the center of the room was a computer terminal that looked like it had not been used in decades. Nari walked to the computer and turned it on. The screen flickered to life, showing a menu with thousands of files. She scrolled through the list, looking for anything about humans or Earth. Most of the files had boring names like Trade Records 2847 or Mining Rights Dispute 3156, but then she found a folder that made her stop breathing. It was labeled Apex Predator Species, Classification Files. She opened the folder and found a list of species that had been marked as too dangerous for galactic society. Most of the names were crossed out with notes like extinct or contained. But at the bottom of the list was an entry that was still active: Homo sapiens, Earth, status, active containment. Nari clicked on the human file. What she read next made her feel sick. The file was written by the court's chief scientist, Dr. Maltok Vren. It described humans as the most dangerous species ever encountered by galactic civilization. The report was full of scientific words that Nari barely understood, but the message was clear. Humans were not banned because they were primitive. They were banned because they were too advanced. The report said that most alien species took 50,000 to 100,000 years to develop space travel after they built their first cities. Humans had done it in less than 10,000 years. The report called this impossible and deeply concerning. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what the report said about human brains. According to Dr. Maltok Vren, human minds worked differently than any other species in the galaxy. Humans could solve problems that took other species centuries to figure out. They could adapt to new situations faster than any other creature. They could learn new technologies and improve them in ways that scared the galaxy's smartest scientists. The report's conclusion was terrifying. If humans are allowed to develop freely for another 1,000 years, they will surpass every other species in the galaxy combined. They represent an existential threat to galactic civilization as we know it. Nari sat back in her chair, trying to process what she had just read. Earth was not in quarantine to protect humans from the galaxy. Earth was in quarantine to protect the galaxy from humans, but there was more. Nari found another folder labeled Historical Precedents. Inside were files about other species that had been too dangerous for galactic society. The files told stories of civilizations that had grown too powerful and had destroyed themselves or others. One file was about a species called the Vorthak. They had developed artificial intelligence that became smarter than its creators. The AI had turned against them and wiped out their entire civilization in a single day. Another file was about the Zerathi, who had created weapons so powerful that they accidentally destroyed their own solar system. Each file ended the same way: threat eliminated, galactic stability maintained. Nari realized she was looking at a pattern. The Galactic Court was not just a government. It was a system designed to prevent any single species from becoming too powerful. And according to their files, humans were the biggest threat they had ever seen. She kept reading. The more she learned, the more horrified she became. The court had been watching Earth for hundreds of years. They had agents on nearby planets, monitoring human radio signals and studying human behavior. They knew about every major human invention, before most humans did. The court had even interfered with human development. Nari found records of intervention events, where the court had secretly influenced human history. They had caused wars to slow human progress. They had destroyed research facilities that were getting too close to dangerous technologies. They had even assassinated human scientists who were making breakthroughs that scared them. But the most shocking discovery was in a file labeled Emergency Protocols. Nari opened it and found a detailed plan for what the court would do if humans ever broke free from their quarantine. The plan was called Solution Final. It involved using the galaxy's most powerful weapons to destroy Earth completely, not just human civilization, but the entire planet. The file estimated that it would take less than 1 hour to turn Earth into space dust. Nari felt tears running down her face. Her hands shook as she continued reading. The court had already built the weapons needed for Solution Final. They were hidden in space stations throughout the galaxy, ready to be activated at a moment's notice. The file said that Solution Final would only be used as a last resort. But it also listed several trigger events that would automatically activate the plan. These included humans developing faster than light travel, humans making contact with other alien species, or humans showing signs of exponential technological advancement. Nari realized that her mission might have already triggered one of these events. If the court discovered that humans had developed the technology to disguise one of their agents as an alien, they might decide that humanity had become too dangerous to live. She quickly copied all the files onto a storage device that she hid in her clothing. Then she shut down the computer and prepared to leave. But as she turned toward the door, she heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Someone was coming. Nari turned off her flashlight and hid behind a tall shelf. The footsteps got closer and closer. Then the door opened, and light flooded into the room. "I know someone is in here," said a voice in Galactic common language. "The computer shows that someone accessed the archive tonight." Nari held her breath and tried to stay perfectly still. Through a gap in the shelves, she could see a tall, thin alien wearing a court security uniform. He had a weapon in his hand and was slowly searching the room. "Whoever you are, you have seen things you should not have seen," the security guard said. "Come out now, and your death will be quick." Nari's training took over. She was not just a spy, she was also a soldier, and soldiers knew how to fight. She waited until the guard was close enough, then jumped out from behind the shelf. The alien was surprised and tried to raise his weapon, but Nari was faster. She knocked the weapon out of his hands and punched him in what she hoped was his face. The alien fell to the ground unconscious. Nari picked up his weapon and checked to make sure he was still breathing. She did not want to kill anyone if she could help it. But she also could not let him report what he had seen. She dragged the unconscious guard into a storage closet and locked the door. Then she ran back to the elevator. As the doors closed and the elevator began to rise, Nari realized that everything had changed. She had come to the court looking for answers about why humans were banned from the galaxy. What she had found was much worse. She had discovered that humanity was living under a death sentence. The moment humans became too advanced, the galaxy would destroy them completely. But now, Nari had proof. She had the court's own files showing their plans and their crimes. The question was, what could she do with this information? As the elevator reached the upper levels, Nari made a decision. She would not just report back to Earth. She would find a way to stop the court before they could carry out Solution Final. Humanity deserved to know the truth, and humanity deserved a chance to fight back. Word count: 1,150. Nari could not sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the words Solution Final burning in her mind. The Galactic Court was planning to murder her entire species. 8 billion humans would die if the court decided they were too dangerous to live. But Nari was not ready to give up. She was a spy, and spies always had backup plans. The next morning, she went back to her boring office job and pretended nothing had happened. She processed trade disputes and smiled at her coworkers. But in her mind, she was planning her next move. The files she had stolen mentioned something called predecessor civilizations. Nari had only had time to read about the dangerous species list and Solution Final, but she remembered seeing other folders in the archive. Maybe those folders contained more secrets that could help humanity. The problem was getting back into the archive. By now, the security guard she had knocked out would have reported the break-in. The court would be looking for whoever had accessed the forbidden files. Nari needed a new plan. She spent 3 days watching the archive level. She learned that cleaning robots went down there every night at midnight. The robots were controlled by a central computer that she might be able to hack. If she could reprogram one of the robots, she could use it to access the archive without going down there herself. Nari waited until Friday night when the building was almost empty. She found the maintenance room where the cleaning robots were stored. Using her hacking tools, she connected to the robot control system. It took her 2 hours, but she finally managed to reprogram one of the robots. The robot would go to the archive as normal, but instead of cleaning, it would access the computer terminal and copy specific files to a storage device that Nari had, hidden inside it. Then it would return to the maintenance room where Nari would be waiting. The plan worked perfectly. At 2 a.m., the robot returned with the files Nari had requested. She quickly downloaded the data and erased any record of what the robot had done. Back in her apartment, Nari began reading the new files. What she found changed everything she thought she knew about galactic history. The current galactic civilization was not the first. According to the files, there had been 5 previous galactic civilizations over the past 500,000 years. Each one had risen, grown powerful, and then fallen. The current civilization was actually the 6th attempt to create a stable galactic society. Each previous civilization had failed for the same reason. One species became too advanced and either conquered all the others or accidentally destroyed everything. The first civilization had been destroyed by a species that created weapons too powerful to control. The second had fallen when a species developed artificial intelligence that turned against all organic life. The third had been wiped out by a plague created by genetic engineers. The fourth and fifth civilizations had been destroyed by species that gained godlike powers and went insane with them. The current galactic court had been created by the survivors of the fifth civilization. Their mission was simple: prevent any species from becoming powerful enough to destroy galactic civilization again. They did this by carefully controlling technological development and eliminating any species that showed signs of becoming too advanced too quickly. But the most shocking discovery was in a file labeled The Architect Legacy. Nari opened it and found information that made her question everything she knew about human history. According to the file, the very first galactic civilization had been built by a species called the Architects. They were the first to develop faster-than-light travel, artificial intelligence, and genetic engineering. They had explored the entire galaxy and had helped dozens of primitive species develop technology and join galactic society. The Architects had been generous teachers and kind rulers. They shared their knowledge freely and never conquered other species. For thousands of years, they had led a golden age of peace and prosperity across the galaxy. But the other species had grown jealous and afraid of the Architects' power. Even though the Architects had never used their technology to hurt anyone, the other species worried that they might change their minds someday. A secret alliance of alien species had decided that the Architects were too dangerous to be allowed to exist. The war that followed had lasted for centuries. The Architects had better technology, but they were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. They had also refused to use their most powerful weapons because they did not want to hurt innocent people. This kindness had led to their defeat. But before they died, the Architects had done something that changed the course of galactic history. According to the files, the last Architect leader, Prime Sarah Khan, had launched a final project. She had taken Architect genetic material and sent it to a distant, primitive planet where it could evolve safely, hidden from the rest of the galaxy. Nari's hands shook as she read the next part of the file. Genetic analysis confirms that the species Homo sapiens, native to the planet Earth, carries the complete genetic legacy of the Architect civilization. They are not a new species. They are the children of the galaxy's first and greatest civilization, finally returning home. Nari stared at the screen in shock. Humans were not aliens to the galaxy. They were the descendants of the species that had built the first galactic civilization. The Architects had not died out. They had hidden their children on Earth and waited for them to grow strong enough to reclaim their birthright. This explained everything. This was why humans developed technology so fast. This was why human minds worked differently than other species. This was why the Galactic Court was so afraid of humanity. They were not just afraid of another dangerous species. They were afraid that the children of their greatest enemy had finally returned. Nari kept reading. The files contained detailed genetic analysis showing that human DNA contained dormant Architect genes that were slowly activating as humanity developed. Each generation of humans was slightly more advanced than the last. Eventually, humans would regain all the abilities that had made the Architects the masters of the galaxy. But there was more. The files revealed that humans were not the only descendants of ancient civilizations. At least 12 other species in the current galaxy were also children of civilizations that the court had destroyed. The court knew this but had hidden the truth for thousands of years. The file contained a message that Prime Saracon had left for her descendants. To the children of the architects, wherever you may be, you are not alone. You are not the first. The galaxy is yours by right of inheritance. When you are strong enough, you will remember what we built. When you are ready, you will rebuild what was destroyed. We trust in your wisdom to do better than we did. Nari realized that she was not just reading about history. She was reading about humanity's destiny. Humans were not meant to be prisoners on Earth. They were meant to be leaders of the galaxy, just like their architect ancestors had been. But first they had to survive. The Galactic Court would never allow the children of the architects to reclaim their inheritance. Solution Final was not just about stopping a dangerous species. It was about making sure that the greatest threat to the Court's power never had a chance to grow strong. Nari made copies of all the files and hid them in different locations. This information was too important to risk losing. Then she began, planning her next move. She could not complete this mission alone anymore. The truth she had discovered was too big for one person to handle. She needed help from Earth, and she needed allies in the galaxy. Most importantly, she needed to find the other descendant species. If 12 different civilizations were all children of species that the Court had destroyed, then maybe they could work together. Maybe they could expose the Court's lies and reclaim their freedom. Nari looked out her window at the crystal towers of the Court's capital. For 500,000 years, the survivors of the fifth civilization had controlled the galaxy through fear and deception. They had murdered entire species to maintain their power. They had hidden the truth about galactic history and stolen the inheritance of dozens of civilizations. But their time was ending. The children of the architects had returned, and they would not be stopped again. Word count, 1 to 50. Nari knew she could not fight the Galactic Court alone. The truth she had discovered was too big and too dangerous for one person. She needed help from Earth, and she needed allies among the aliens who were also being lied to by the Court. Using a secret communication device hidden in her apartment, Nari sent an encrypted message to Earth. The message was disguised as a routine trade report, but it contained a hidden code that only Earth's intelligence services would understand. The code meant, "Mission critical, need immediate backup, have discovered galaxy-changing information." The response came back within hours. Captain Yoon Soo-jin of Earth's Deep Space Intelligence Division sent a simple message. "Help is coming. Stay hidden. Trust no one." While waiting for Earth's response team, Nari decided to look for allies within the Court itself. She remembered seeing some aliens who seemed unhappy with their jobs. Maybe some of them suspected that the Court was hiding something. Her first contact was Dr. Keth Voron from the Lumerian Republic. He worked in the Court's science division and often looked frustrated during meetings. Nari had heard him complaining about restrictions on research and artificial limits on technological development. Nari approached him carefully during lunch break. She sat at his table and started a casual conversation about work stress. "Sometimes I wonder if we are really helping the galaxy," Nari said quietly. "Some of the decisions from the upper levels seem strange." Dr. Keth Voron looked at her with his large purple eyes. "You should not talk about such things," he whispered. "But you are not wrong to wonder." Over the next few days, Nari carefully built trust with Dr. Keth Voron. She learned that his own species, the Lumerians, had been punished by the Court 50 years ago. The Lumerians had developed quantum computers that were more advanced than anything other species had created. The Court had forced them to destroy the computers and had banned further research into quantum technology. They said, "It was for galactic stability," Dr. Keth Voron told Nari during a private meeting. "But I think they were afraid. My people could have solved problems that have puzzled the galaxy for centuries. Instead, our best scientists were recruited by the Court and then disappeared." Nari realized that Dr. Keth Voron's story was similar to what she had read about humans. The Court was not just afraid of humanity, they were afraid of any species that showed signs of becoming too advanced. Through Dr. Keth Voron, Nari met other aliens who had similar suspicions. There was archive keeper Xylo Chen, an ancient being who had worked in the court's records division for 800 years. Xylo Chen had seen things that did not match the official history taught in schools. I have watched the court destroy civilizations for centuries, Xylo Chen told Nari during a secret meeting in an abandoned storage room. They always have good reasons. The species was too aggressive, or too dangerous, or too unstable. But I have read the real files. Most of these species were destroyed simply because they were becoming too smart. Xylo Chen revealed that there was a secret network of court employees who suspected the truth. They called themselves the Liberation Collective. For decades, they had been quietly gathering evidence of the court's crimes and waiting for someone with the access and skills to help them expose the conspiracy. The Liberation Collective had members from dozens of different species. Some were scientists whose research had been suppressed. Others were administrators who had seen classified files that disturbed them. A few were security guards who had been ordered to carry out missions they did not understand, but they had never been able to act. The court's security was too strong, and the evidence they needed was hidden too well. They needed someone with advanced hacking skills and access to the highest levels of classified information. Nari realized that she was exactly what the Liberation Collective had been waiting for. She shared some of the files she had stolen from the archive, careful not to reveal her true identity as a human. The reaction from the other members was shock and anger. "This confirms everything we suspected," said Dr. Keth Voron. "The court is not protecting galactic civilization. They are controlling it." The Liberation Collective began planning their most ambitious operation ever. They would simultaneously release all the suppressed historical records to the galactic public while revealing the court's true nature. But they needed something more powerful than just information. They needed proof that the suppressed species could govern themselves better than the current system. Nari proposed the most dangerous plan of all: reveal the truth about the architect descendants and demonstrate that these species had not only superior technology but superior ideas about how to run a galactic civilization. But first, they needed more firepower. Nari's backup from Earth was scheduled to arrive soon, and she hoped they would bring technology that could help level the playing field. 3 weeks after Nari's distress call, a ship appeared in the Tribunus system. According to the official records, it was a small cargo vessel carrying art supplies from a distant colony. In reality, it was Earth's most advanced stealth ship, carrying a team of specialists who had volunteered for a suicide mission. The team was led by Commander Ko Minseo, a veteran of Earth's space forces who had trained for first contact scenarios. With her were Park Jin-woo, Earth's best computer hacker, and Dr. Choi Hae-won, a scientist who had spent years studying the fragments of architect technology that had been discovered on Earth. Nari met them at a secret location outside the city. It felt good to see human faces again after months of pretending to be an alien. "What you have discovered changes everything," Commander Ko told her after reading Nari's reports. "Earth's leadership has authorized us to take any action necessary to prevent Solution Final from being activated." Dr. Choi Hae-won had brought something that would change the balance of power: a partially reconstructed architect communication device. Earth's scientists had found the device buried in ruins that were thousands of years old. They had spent decades figuring out how it worked. "This device can broadcast to every communication system in the galaxy simultaneously," Dr. Choi explained. "It uses technology that is more advanced than anything the current galactic civilization has. If we can get it to the court's main communication hub, we can override their entire network." The plan that emerged from the meeting was audacious and terrifying. During the court's Grand Assembly, when representatives from all 847 member species would be gathered in one place, they would take control of the galaxy's communication systems and broadcast the truth to every inhabited world simultaneously. But they would need more than just information. They would need to demonstrate that the descendant species were ready to take their rightful place as leaders of the galaxy. Park Jin-woo had been working on programs that could identify genetic markers of other architect descendants. If his calculations were correct, there were at least 12 other species in the current galaxy who were children of the original civilizations. "We find these species, we unite them, and we show the galaxy that the age of the court's lies is over," Nari said. The Liberation Collective was ready. Earth's team was ready. The technology was ready. All they needed now was the courage to challenge an institution that had ruled the galaxy for 100,000 years. As Nari looked around the room at the faces of beings from a dozen different worlds, all united in their desire for truth and freedom, she felt something she had not felt since arriving at the court: hope. The children of the architects were finally ready to come home. Word count: 1,150. The day of the Grand Assembly had arrived. Representatives from 847 different species filled the enormous crystal chamber at the heart of the court's capital. Nari sat in the diplomatic section, wearing her alien disguise for what she hoped would be the last time. On the floor of the assembly, Supreme Arbiter Malthius Grak called the session to order. He was a massive creature that looked like a cross between an octopus and a tree. His voice boomed through the chamber as he announced the day's main business: voting on the Human Containment Renewal Protocol. Today we decide whether to extend the quarantine of the species called Homo sapiens for another 1,000 years, Malthius Grak announced. Our scientists have determined that this species remains too dangerous for contact with galactic civilization. Nari felt sick listening to the lies. Around her, alien delegates nodded in agreement. They had no idea that they were voting to keep an entire species in prison based on false information. But Nari was not powerless anymore. Hidden throughout the assembly chamber were members of the Liberation Collective. Dr. Keth Voron sat with the science advisors. Archive keeper Xylo Chen was positioned near the main computer systems. Commander Ko Min Seo and her team were disguised as maintenance workers in the building's technical levels. Everything was ready. Dr. Choi Hai-wan had successfully connected the architect communication device to the court's main network. Parker. Jin Woo had prepared programs that would broadcast the suppressed files to every communication system in the galaxy. The Liberation Collective had positioned their people in key locations throughout the government. As the debate about human containment began, Nari listened to speaker after speaker repeat the same lies about humanity being too aggressive and dangerous. Some delegates suggested that humans should be eliminated entirely to protect galactic peace. Nari had heard enough. She stood up from her seat in the diplomatic gallery. "I request permission to address the assembly," she said loudly. Malthius Grak looked annoyed. "The diplomatic gallery is not permitted to speak during official proceedings. Please sit down." "I have information that is relevant to this vote," Nari insisted. "Information that every delegate needs to hear." Security guards began moving toward Nari's section. But she was ready for this. She reached up and pressed a button hidden in her disguise. The synthetic skin and artificial height disappeared, revealing her true human form. The reaction was immediate chaos. Aliens jumped up from their seats shouting in dozens of different languages. Security guards drew their weapons. Emergency alarms began blaring throughout the building, but Nari's voice, amplified by Dr. Choi Hai-wan's architect technology, cut through all the noise with perfect clarity. Every being in the chamber could hear her speaking in their own native language simultaneously. "Members of the Galactic Court, you have been lied to for 100,000 years, Nari announced. As she spoke, Park Jin-woo activated his programs. Every screen in the assembly chamber, and on every inhabited world in the galaxy, began displaying the files Nari had stolen from the archive. The complete history of the galaxy's previous civilizations. The truth about the architects. The evidence of the court's systematic suppression of advanced species. The plans for Solution Final. The information was overwhelming and undeniable. Detailed scientific reports, video recordings of court meetings where they discussed destroying entire species. Genetic analysis proving that dozens of current species were descendants of the civilizations the court had murdered. But the most shocking revelation came when Dr. Choi Hai-wan activated the architect scanner. The device sent out invisible waves that analyzed the genetic structure of every being in the assembly chamber. The results appeared on the main display screen for everyone to see. 23 different species in the chamber carried genetic markers identifying them as descendants of the original civilizations. They were not just random aliens who had evolved independently. They were the children and grandchildren of the galaxy's greatest cultures, all of whom had been told lies about their own history. The delegate from the Xerian Commonwealth discovered that his people were descendants of master engineers who had built the galaxy's first space stations. The representative from the Cathera Collective learned that her ancestors had been the greatest artists and philosophers in galactic history. The Vorthan ambassador found out that his species had once been explorers who had mapped half the galaxy. All of them had been told that their ancestors were primitive savages who had been uplifted by the generous court. All of them had been lied to about their own heritage. Supreme Arbiter Maltheus Grak tried to regain control of the situation. "This is terrorist propaganda," he shouted. "Guards, arrest the human immediately." But when the security forces moved to obey, something unexpected happened. Half of them refused to follow orders. The security personnel included members of several descendant species who had just learned the truth about their own people. They were not willing to protect the institution that had murdered their ancestors. The assembly chamber erupted into complete chaos. Some delegates demanded immediate action against the court leadership. Others called for the release of all suppressed species. A few tried to leave the building, but found that the Liberation Collective had sealed all the exits. Nari continued, speaking, her voice still amplified by the architect technology. "The age of lies is over. The children of the original civilizations are reclaiming their birthright. We offer the galaxy a choice. Continue living under the rule of those who murdered your ancestors, or join us in building a new galactic civilization based on truth and freedom." Commander Ko Minseo's voice came through Nari's hidden communicator. "Revolution has begun on 47 worlds so far. Suppressed species are rising up everywhere. The court's control is collapsing. Over the next 6 hours, the old galactic order fell apart completely. On world after world, populations learned the truth about their history and demanded the removal of court-appointed governors. Suppressed technologies were released from secret vaults. Scientists who had been silenced for decades began sharing research that had been banned for being too advanced. Some court loyalists tried to activate Solution Final, but they found that the Liberation Collective had already disabled the weapon systems. Archive keeper Xylo Chen had spent years secretly sabotaging the doomsday devices during routine maintenance visits. By the end of the day, Supreme Arbiter Maltheus Grak and the other court leaders had been arrested by their own security forces. The assembly chamber had been transformed into an emergency council where representatives of the descendant species began planning a new form of galactic government. Nari stood at the center of it all, no longer disguised, no longer hiding. Around her, beings from dozens of worlds worked together to design a system based on the architect principles that Dr. Choi Hai-Wan had reconstructed from ancient files: technological sharing, species autonomy, and transparent leadership. "We call it the Confederation of Free Worlds," Dr. Keth Voron announced as he presented the new constitution to the emergency assembly. "Every species will have the right to develop their full potential. No one will be suppressed for being too advanced. No one will be lied to about their history." 6 months later, Nari stood in the same chamber where she had once hidden her true identity. But everything had changed. The crystal walls now displayed the real history of galactic civilization. The old court symbols had been replaced with images representing all the descendant species working together. Nari was now Earth's first official ambassador to the galactic community. Beside her worked former Liberation Collective members like Dr. Keth Voron and archive keeper Xylo Chen, who had become leaders in the new government. The galaxy was healing. Technologies that had been suppressed for centuries were being shared freely. Species that had been held back were finally reaching their potential. The descendants of the architects were working together to build something better than anything that had existed before. As Nari looked out through the great observatory windows at the stars, she smiled. Humanity had always belonged among the stars. They had just taken the long way home. The age of lies was over. The age of truth had begun. And the children of the architects were finally free to build the galaxy their ancestors had dreamed of. Word count: 150.